It all started with the rain. I know it's a cliché, the kind of thing you read in a paperback novel you find at a dusty, secondhand bookstore, but for me, it's the undeniable truth. The rain was a curtain, thick and gray and relentless, hiding the city from itself. It was the perfect cover. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, a wild, panicked rhythm that seemed loud enough for the whole world to hear. My palms were slick with a nervous sweat that had nothing to do with the humidity. I was walking, or rather speed walking, down a slick, glistening sidewalk, my shoulders hunched against the downpour. I wore a heavy, black trench coat, the kind a detective in an old movie might wear. It was my armor, my shield. It felt a size too big, a deliberate choice to obscure the lines of my body, to make me into a generic, unnoticeable shape in the gloomy afternoon. But underneath the armor, that's where the real story was. Underneath the thick, unforgiving wool was something else entirely. A secret, a whisper-thin, lace-trimmed lavender dress. The fabric was so light it felt like a ghost against my skin, a sensation that was both thrilling and terrifying. With every step, the delicate hem brushed against my knees, a constant, silken reminder of what I was doing, of the line I was crossing. I'd never worn anything like it outside of my own bedroom, and the thought that anyone might see, that a gust of wind might betray me, was enough to make me want to turn and run back to the safety of my anonymous apartment. Every person who passed, their faces hidden under the hoods of raincoats or the domes of umbrellas, felt like a judge. Their eyes, I imagined, could see right through the heavy coat, right through to the delicate lace and the scared man wearing it. Of course, no one was looking. They were all just trying to get out of the rain, lost in their own worlds. But my fear wasn't rational. It was a deep, primal thing, a monster that had lived in my gut for as long as I could remember. Then I saw it, a warm yellow glow spilling out onto the wet pavement, the velvet moon. It was a small coffee shop, tucked between a laundromat and a closed-down shoe store. It looked like a haven, taking a deep, shaky breath that did nothing to calm my racing heart. I pushed the door open. A little bell chimed, announcing my arrival. The air inside was warm and thick with the smell of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon. It was a cozy, cluttered place, with mismatched armchairs and little wooden tables, and there, at a table by the window, a cup of steaming tea cradled in her hands, was Clara. She looked up as the bell rang, and her face broke into a smile that was so genuine, so warm. It was like the sun coming out from behind the storm clouds. I'd known Clara for 3 months, but only through the safety of a screen, through the typed words and carefully selected profile pictures of an online support group called Gender Expression and Support. Seeing her in person, real and solid and smiling at me, was overwhelming. "You made it," she said, her voice as gentle as her smile. I navigated the short distance to her table, my movements stiff and awkward. I felt like a giant, clumsy oaf in my big wet coat. I slid into the chair opposite her, my hands trembling as I placed them on the table. "Hey," I managed to croak out, my voice sounding rough and foreign to my own ears. "Don't be nervous, Evan," she said softly, her eyes full of a kindness I wasn't used to. "You're safe here." Her words were a balm. I tried to return her smile, but I'm sure it came out as a grimace. As I shifted in my seat, trying to get comfortable, the front of my coat fell open slightly, just a few inches, but it was enough. A flash of purple lace was visible against the dark interior of the coat. My blood ran cold. I quickly pulled the coat closed, my heart hammering against my ribs again. But she'd seen it. Her eyes flicked down for a fraction of a second, and then back up to mine. There was no shock, no confusion, no judgment. There was only that same gentle warmth. "That's a beautiful color," she said, her voice quiet and even. "It suits you." And just like that, the world stopped turning. It was such a simple sentence, 4 little words. "It suits you." But no one had ever said anything like that to me before. I'd spent my entire life feeling like I was wearing a costume that didn't fit, a heavy, ill-fitting suit of masculinity that chafed and constricted. To have someone see a tiny piece of my true self, the self I kept hidden away, and tell me that it suited me. It was like a lightning strike to my soul. My throat tightened, a painful, burning lump forming. My eyes stung with tears I refused to let fall. For the first time in my 26 years, I felt seen, not just looked at, but truly seen and accepted. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, a jerky, awkward motion. Clara seemed to understand. She didn't press. She just took a sip of her tea and started talking about the different kinds of herbal infusions she liked, about the silly plot of a movie she'd watched the night before, about her dream of one day owning a small bookstore with a cat that would sleep in the window. She filled the space with easy, comfortable chatter, giving me time to pull myself back together. We sat there for 2 hours, the rain drumming a steady rhythm against the window pane. We talked about everything and nothing. We talked about our fears of being misunderstood, our hopes for a future where we could just be. I found myself telling her things I'd never told another living soul. About the secret box of clothes hidden under my bed. About the nights I'd spent crying because the face in the mirror felt like a stranger's. And she listened. She really listened. She didn't offer easy platitudes or cheap advice. She just listened and nodded, making me feel like the most normal person in the world. When we finally decided to leave, the rain had softened to a gentle drizzle. The city lights were beginning to blur in the twilight. As we stood under the coffee shop's awning, Clara opened a large, bright yellow umbrella. She turned to me, her eyes serious but still so kind. "If this was your first time wearing a dress outside," she said, her voice just loud enough to be heard over the city sounds, "I want you to remember this moment. This isn't the end of your fear, but it's the beginning of your freedom." She gave my arm a gentle squeeze, a brief reassuring touch, and then she walked off into the misty evening, a bright yellow beacon in the gray. I stood there for a long time, watching until she disappeared. The damp chill of the evening air seeped into my coat. But I didn't feel cold. I felt a warmth spreading through my chest, a tiny flickering flame that had been lit in the cozy confines of the velvet moon. Clara was right. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning, and for the first time, I wasn't terrified of what came next. That first meeting cracked open a door I'd kept bolted shut my entire life. In the weeks that followed, I found myself walking through it, cautiously at first, and then with a growing sense of wonder. The catalyst was Clara. She became my guide, my mentor, my anchor in a world that suddenly felt full of possibility. I started visiting her apartment regularly. It was a small third-floor walk-up in a much quieter part of town, a stark contrast to my own sterile, beige box of a place. Her home was an extension of her warm, bright, and full of life. Sunlight poured through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The whole place smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Potted plants crowded every available surface, their green leaves spilling over the edges of their containers. It was a sanctuary. Our sessions, as I began to think of them, were informal and gentle. She never pushed. She would make us tea, always some exotic, fragrant blend, and we would just talk. But soon the talking evolved. "Have you ever tried foundation?" she asked one afternoon, her tone casual, as if she were asking if I'd ever tried a new flavor of ice cream. I shook my head, my cheeks flushing. No, I wouldn't even know where to start. "It's easy," she said with a smile. "It's just like painting. You're just creating a smooth canvas." And so, my lessons began. She taught me how to find the right shade, dabbing little stripes along my jawline until we found one that disappeared into my skin. She showed me the strange, cool sensation of the liquid foundation on my fingertips and the gentle, repetitive motion of blending it in with a soft sponge. I watched, mesmerized, in her bathroom mirror as the shadow of my beard, the slight redness of my skin, the tired circles under my eyes, all softened and disappeared. It wasn't about hiding. It felt more like correcting, like I was finally wiping away the parts of my reflection that felt wrong. Next came blush. She showed me how to smile and apply it to the apples of my cheeks, sweeping upwards. The first time I saw that soft, rosy glow on my face, I was startled. It added a life, a softness that I'd never seen before. It made my face look kinder. Eyeliner was the real challenge. "The trick is to have a steady hand and not to blink," she'd say, laughing as I smudged a black line halfway up my eyelid for the 5th time. Her patience was infinite. She'd take a cotton swab with a little makeup remover and gently wipe away my mistakes. her touch light and professional. When I finally managed a thin, shaky line along my upper lash line, the effect was transformative. My eyes, which I'd always thought of as dull and plain, suddenly looked bigger, more defined, more expressive. They looked feminine. But it wasn't just makeup. Clara taught me about movement. You walk like you're apologizing for taking up space, she told me one day, not unkindly. I'd never thought about it, but she was right. I walked with my shoulders hunched, my head down, my steps heavy and hurried. She had me take off my clunky sneakers and walk barefoot across her wooden floor. Think about your posture, she instructed. Shoulders back, head up. Don't lead with your feet. Lead with your hips. Let them sway, just a little. It's not a performance. It's just about feeling the rhythm of your own body. It felt ridiculous at first. I was clumsy and stiff, my movements jerky, but she was patient, demonstrating a walk that was fluid and graceful without being exaggerated. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to get it. It was a subtle shift, a change in balance and intention that made me feel less like a lead weight and more like, well, more like I was floating. The culmination of all these lessons happened one Tuesday evening. The sun had set and her apartment was filled with the soft, warm glow of a few lamps. She had encouraged me to bring one of the dresses from my secret box at home. It was a deep emerald green silk dress, one I'd bought online months ago but had never had the courage to wear, even in private. She helped me with the zipper, her fingers brushing my back, sending a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the cold. She'd curled my hair earlier, my mousy brown locks now falling in soft waves around my shoulders. She'd done my makeup with a deft, practiced hand a smoky eye, a touch of mascara, and a shade of lipstick she called rosewood. When it was all done, she led me to the full-length mirror that leaned against her living room wall. And I saw her. The person staring back at me wasn't Evan. Evan was angles and shadows and a perpetual frown. This person was all different. The makeup softened my jawline. The curled hair framed a face that looked delicate. The green silk dress skimmed over my body, hinting at curves I didn't know I had. The person in the mirror looked poised, beautiful, and serene. I reached up and touched my face, and the reflection did the same. It was me, but it was a version of me I'd only ever seen in my deepest, most secret dreams. I don't recognize myself, I whispered, my voice thick with a confusing mix of awe and fear. Clara came to stand behind me, placing her hands gently on my shoulders. Her reflection smiled at mine in the mirror. "That's okay," she said softly. "Sometimes, to find who you really are, you have to lose the person you thought you were supposed to be." We stood there in silence for a long moment, just looking at the two figures in the mirror. Then, she asked a question that changed everything. "Have you ever thought about a different name for her?" She gestured to my reflection. I froze. A name? I had. Of course, late at night, when the world was quiet, I'd whispered names to myself, trying them on for size. Most of them felt wrong, like costumes that didn't fit. But there was one that always came back to me. It felt less like a name I had chosen and more like a name that had been waiting for me. It was soft and elegant, like the sound of harp music in a distant room. I took a shaky breath. "Seraphine," I said, the name feeling strange and wonderful on my tongue. I think that's me." A slow, beautiful smile spread across Clara's face. She squeezed my shoulders gently. "Hello, Seraphine," she said. "It's so nice to finally meet you." Hearing her say it, hearing that name spoken out loud by someone else, was like a key turning in a lock deep inside my chest. A warmth spread through me, a radiant glowing light that pushed back all the shadows. In that moment, looking at the reflection in the mirror, I wasn't Evan playing dress-up anymore. I was Seraphine, and I was home. The birth of Seraphine in the safety of Clara's apartment was one thing. Taking her out into the world was another entirely. The idea was terrifying, a mountain of anxiety that seemed impossible to climb. But Clara, in her infinite wisdom, knew that a bird kept in a cage would never learn to fly. "We're going shopping," she announced one Saturday morning, her voice bright and decisive. My stomach immediately twisted into a knot. Shopping like out in a mall. Exactly, she said, completely unfazed by the sheer panic in my voice. You need clothes that are actually yours, not just things you've ordered online and hidden away. You need to experience the joy of picking something out, trying it on, and buying it for yourself, for Seraphine. I spent the next hour in a state of near paralysis. Every doubt I'd ever had came screaming back. What if people stared? What if they laughed? What if someone said something cruel? It was a litany of fear I knew all too well. Clara was a whirlwind of calm, positive energy. She helped me get ready. We chose a simple, A-line navy blue dress, modest and elegant. She did my makeup, keeping it light and natural. Daytime look, she'd explained with a wink. She brushed my hair until it shone. By the time we were ready to leave, the reflection in the mirror was undeniably Seraphine. She looked nervous, her eyes wide and her smile fragile. But she was there. "Ready?" Clara asked, her hand on the doorknob. I took a deep breath. No, but let's go anyway. Every step from her apartment door to the car was an ordeal. I was convinced every neighbor who saw us knew my secret. The short drive to the boutique shopping district downtown was silent, the air in the car thick with my unspoken anxiety. My hands were clenched so tightly in my lap that my knuckles were white. But Clara was my rock. She kept a steady stream of light conversation going, pointing out interesting buildings, humming along to the radio. She didn't say, "Don't be nervous," or "It will be fine," because she knew that wouldn't help. Instead, she just acted as if this was the most normal thing in the world, two friends going shopping on a Saturday. Her calmness was a lifeline. She'd chosen a small, independent boutique, not a sprawling, anonymous department store. As we pushed open the heavy glass door, a little bell tinkled, just like at the coffee shop. The store was bright and airy, filled with racks of colorful clothes and the scent of expensive perfume. A woman behind the counter, stylishly dressed with sharp silver hair, looked up and smiled. "Hello, girls," she said warmly. "Let me know if you need any help finding anything today." Girls. The word hit me with the force of a physical blow. She had looked at me, at Seraphine, and had seen a woman. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a polite fiction. In her eyes, that's what I was. I stopped dead in the middle of the store. My breath hitched in my throat. My entire body started to tremble. A fine, uncontrollable shudder. Tears welled up in my eyes, hot and sudden, and I didn't even know why. Was it relief, joy, the sheer overwhelming shock of being seen for who I felt I was? It was all of those things at once. Clara was at my side in an instant. She put a hand on my back. A steady, grounding pressure. Deep breaths, she murmured, her voice low and for my ears only. "You're okay. See, it's okay." I nodded, unable to speak, and swiped at my eyes furiously, trying to stop the tears before they ruined the mascara Clara had so carefully applied. The saleswoman didn't seem to notice my emotional crisis, or if she did, she was professional enough to ignore it. She just went back to tidying a stack of folded sweaters. After a few minutes, the trembling subsided, and I was able to breathe again. The fear that had been a roaring monster in my head was reduced to a small, whimpering creature in the corner. That one. Simple. Casual word girls had been a more powerful validation than I could ever have imagined. The rest of the shopping trip felt like a dream, guided by Clara's confident energy. I started to browse the racks. I touched fabrics, soft cashmere, crisp cotton, smooth silk. I looked at colors I'd never dared to consider for myself. Clara would pull things out, hold them up to me, and say things like, "Oh, this green would be stunning with your eyes," or "You have the height to pull off a maxi dress like this." She encouraged me to pick out a few things to try on. I chose a pair of well-fitting dark wash jeans, a soft cream-colored sweater, and, on a whim, a dress that was completely unlike anything I owned. It was a pale pastel pink, with a fitted bodice and a full, floaty skirt. It was the kind of dress I imagined a princess in a fairy tale would wear. In the dressing room, my hands shook as I unzipped my navy dress and slipped the pink one over my head. The fabric was light and airy. I smoothed down the skirt and took a hesitant step out of the curtained cubicle. Clara was waiting, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I emerged. And her friendly smile faltered, her eyes went wide. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly open. What I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Does it look bad? Is it too much? I immediately started to second-guess myself. The pink was too bright, the style too feminine. She finally blinked, as if coming out of a trance. No, she said, her voice sounding a little breathless. No, Seraphine, you look truly beautiful. She took a step closer. It's not just the dress, she said, her gaze meeting mine in the mirror. It's your eyes. They're shining. I've never seen you look so alive. I looked at my reflection then. Really looked. She was right. The person in the pink dress was smiling. A real, genuine, trembling smile. There was a light in her eyes that had never been there before. In that moment, standing in the middle of a brightly lit boutique, the fear was gone. The anxiety was gone. Evan was gone. There was only Seraphine, and she wasn't just existing. She was living. I bought the pink dress. As the silver-haired woman rang up my purchases, she smiled at me again. That dress is going to look wonderful on you, she said. Have a great day, ladies. Walking out of that store, a shopping bag swinging from my hand, the sun felt warmer on my skin. The city seemed brighter, the sounds less jarring. I was still Seraphine, in my simple navy dress, but something fundamental had shifted inside me. I had walked into the world, and the world had, for a moment at least, welcomed me, and that was more than enough. The external transformation was one thing: the clothes, the makeup, the way I learned to carry myself. But Clara knew that becoming Seraphine was a much deeper process. It wasn't just about looking the part, it was about inhabiting it completely, from the inside out. And that meant tackling two of the most intimate and revealing aspects of a person: their voice and their body. Our voice training sessions began in the evenings, sitting on the plush rug in her living room with mugs of chamomile tea. At first, it was incredibly awkward. Okay, let's start with humming, she'd say, her own voice a model of calm resonance. Try to feel the vibration in your chest, and then slowly try to move it up into your head. I would hum, my voice a low, masculine rumble. It felt foolish, like a pointless exercise. My voice was my voice. It was deep. It had always been deep. Trying to change it felt like trying to change my height. Don't force it, Clara coached gently. You're not trying to do a caricature or an impression. You're just trying to find a different placement for your sound, a lighter one. Night after night, we worked on it. We did breathing exercises that made me dizzy. We practiced scales, my voice cracking and wavering embarrassingly as I tried to reach higher notes. We moved on to reading passages from books out loud. I'd read a sentence, and she'd have me repeat it, but with a different inflection, a softer cadence. Listen to how women speak, she told me. It's not always about pitch. It's about the melody of the sentences. There are more ups and downs, more lilts. Men tend to speak in a flatter, more monotone range. The most frustrating part was that I knew she was right. When I spoke, the sound that came out felt like a betrayal. It was Evan's voice coming out of Seraphine's mouth, a jarring disconnect that shattered the illusion every time I opened it. Don't think of it as just your vocal cords, she said one night. Sensing my frustration, think of it as your heart. Your voice isn't just about the sound, it's about the emotion you're trying to share. Let your feelings soften the edges. That piece of advice was a breakthrough. I stopped trying to mechanically produce a female voice and started trying to speak with Seraphine's feelings. I thought about the gentleness, the vulnerability, the quiet joy I felt as her, and I tried to let that color my words. Slowly, painstakingly, something began to shift. The pitch rose slightly, yes, but more importantly, the harsh edges of my speech began to soften. A new rhythm emerged, more fluid and expressive. It wasn't a perfect female voice by any means, but it was Seraphine's voice, and for the first time, it sounded like it belonged to me. At the same time, my body was undergoing its own quiet revolution. After months of research and therapy sessions, I had made the decision to start hormone replacement therapy. It was a monumental step, both terrifying and exhilarating. Clara drove me to my first endocrinologist appointment and held my hand in the waiting room. The effects were subtle at first, almost imperceptible. I'd wake up every morning and stare at my reflection, searching for any sign of change. For weeks, there was nothing. But then, little things started to happen. I first noticed my skin one morning. While washing my face, I realized my skin felt different, softer. The slightly rough, oily texture was gone, replaced by a smoothness that was startling. I spent 5 minutes just stroking my own cheek, marveling at the change. Then came the emotional shifts. I'd always been a stoic person, burying my feelings deep down. On hormones, the walls I'd built around my heart started to crumble. I cried during a commercial for dog food. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated joy watching a sunset. My emotions were closer to the surface, more intense and vivid than they had ever been. It was unsettling, but it also felt right. I felt more connected to the world, more human. The physical changes continued to unfold slowly. A second puberty happening in my late 20s. My body hair thinned. The way I smelled changed, losing its musky edge and becoming something sweeter, fainter. I noticed a slight redistribution of fat, my waist becoming a little more defined, my hips and thighs a little fuller. It was a gradual sculpting, my body slowly aligning itself with the image I held in my mind. This journey, both vocal and physical, deepened the bond between Clara and me. It was a period of intense vulnerability for me, and she was my constant, unwavering support. She celebrated every tiny victory the first time I answered the phone and wasn't misgendered, the day I noticed the first hint of breast buds forming, a tender and surreal milestone. Our friendship had always been close, but a new kind of intimacy was beginning to blossom in the quiet spaces between us. It was in the way she would correct a stray strand of my hair, her touch lingering for a moment longer than necessary. It was in the way my heart would skip a beat when she laughed at one of my jokes. One evening, we were sitting on her couch, watching an old black and white movie. I'd had a long, emotionally draining day, and I was leaning my head against her shoulder, a comfortable platonic gesture we'd shared before. My hair, which was now long enough to brush my shoulders, was fanned out against her sweater. Almost unconsciously, she began to run her fingers through it, a slow, soothing motion. Then, her hand moved from my hair to the nape of my neck, her thumb gently stroking the sensitive skin there. A jolt went through me, a current of electricity that was anything but platonic. It was warm and sharp, and it made every nerve in my body stand at attention. My breath caught in my chest. The air between us suddenly felt thick, charged with an unspoken energy. I could feel the warmth of her body, smell the faint, clean scent of her shampoo. She must have felt the shift in me, the way my body tensed. She pulled her hand back quickly, as if she'd touched a hot stove. I'm sorry, she whispered, her face flushing a delicate shade of pink in the flickering light of the television. It's okay, I managed to say, my voice coming out as a rough, emotional rasp. It was Seraphine's voice, full of a feeling I couldn't yet name. We didn't speak for the rest of the movie. We just sat there, a few inches of space now separating us on the couch, but I was more aware of her presence than ever before. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was the quiet, tentative beginning of something that felt just as profound. It was a connection that went deeper than words, forged in makeup lessons and voice exercises, in shared fears and quiet triumphs. It was the understanding that we were no longer just a guide and a student, or even just friends. We were two souls on a shared journey, and our paths were drawing inextricably, wonderfully, closer. The unspoken tension that had sparked between us that night on the couch didn't disappear. It lingered, a gentle humming energy that transformed the dynamic of our friendship. There was a new shyness in our interactions, a heightened awareness in our glances, a carefulness in our casual touches. It was a delicate dance, and neither of us seemed to know the next step. The tipping point came on a perfect late autumn afternoon. The air was crisp and cool, and the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The leaves on the trees had turned to fiery shades of red and gold, and they crunched under our feet as we walked along the path bordering the town lake. I was wearing my cream-colored sweater and the dark-washed jeans we'd bought together on our first shopping trip. It was a simple, casual outfit, but I felt more myself in it than I ever had in anything from my old life. My hair, now a little past my shoulders, was caught in the gentle breeze, whipping strands across my face. I felt a sense of peace I hadn't thought possible, a quiet contentment that came from simply being. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying the beauty of the day. The sun was beginning to dip towards the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. Finally, Clara stopped walking and turned to face me. She looked out over the water, which was shimmering like a sheet of hammered gold in the late afternoon light. Her expression was thoughtful, a little bit nervous. "You know," she began, her voice soft, "when I first met you, I was just so impressed by your courage, the courage it took to even wear that dress under your coat, to show up at the coffee shop. I wanted to help you. I wanted to be a good friend." She paused, kicking at a loose stone with the toe of her boot. "But somewhere along the way," she continued, finally turning her gaze from the lake to me, "it stopped being about that. It stopped being about your journey, as amazing as it is." Her eyes, a warm, gentle brown, held mine. My heart started to beat a little faster. "I like you, Seraphine," she said, her voice clear and steady despite the vulnerability in her eyes. "Not the idea of you, not the transformation, just you, the way you get this little wrinkle between your eyebrows when you're concentrating on your eyeliner, the way you get so passionate when you talk about old movies, the person you are. I like her. A lot." The world seemed to fall away. There was only the golden light, the crisp air, and Clara's earnest, open face. All the air left my lungs in a rush. I had dreamed of being accepted, of being seen, but I had never, in my wildest fantasies, dared to dream of being wanted, of being liked, loved, maybe for the person I was becoming. A smile spread across my face, a real, watery, overwhelming smile. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes, but this time they were purely tears of joy. "You know," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "I'm still scared. So much of the time, I feel like I'm walking on a tightrope, and I'm terrified of looking down." I took a step closer to her, closing the small gap that remained between us. "But when I'm with you," I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper, "the rope feels wider, it feels solid. With you here, I feel like I can do more than just survive this. I feel like I can actually love and be loved." She let out a shaky breath, a beautiful smile lighting up her face. Without a word, she reached out and took my hand, her fingers laced with mine, a perfect fit. The world seemed to slow down. She leaned in, and I met her halfway. Her lips were soft, hesitant at first. A gentle question. I answered with a pressure of my own, a confirmation. It was a kiss that was both a beginning and a culmination. It wasn't a fiery, passionate explosion. It was something quieter, sweeter, and infinitely more profound. It tasted of autumn air and chamomile tea and a future I was finally brave enough to want. It was gentle and brief, but it sealed everything. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling, our foreheads resting against each other. The sun had finally touched the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of pink and orange. That day, standing by the golden lake, holding hands as the sun went down, I was no longer just Seraphine, a woman finding herself. I was Seraphine, Clara's girlfriend, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely, utterly, and perfectly whole. The years that followed that kiss by the lake were a whirlwind of change, a period of profound and sometimes difficult transformation that solidified not only who I was, but who we were together. Becoming a couple was easy. The rest of the journey required a deeper well of strength and commitment. The hormone therapy became a steady rhythm in my life, a bi-weekly injection that marked the passage of time. The changes to my body became more pronounced. My hips and thighs softened and curved, giving me a silhouette that no longer required clever clothing choices to appear feminine. My chest developed, slowly but surely, into small, sensitive breasts. It was a surreal experience, watching my body morph into a form that felt so alien and yet so fundamentally right. There were growing pains, both literal and emotional. But with every change, the reflection in the mirror looked less like a work in progress and more simply like me. Then came the legal battles, the endless paperwork to change my name and gender marker on my driver's license, my social security card, my birth certificate. Each form was a bureaucratic hurdle, each interaction with a skeptical government employee a test of my resolve. It was a draining, dehumanizing process at times, a constant fight to have the world recognize on paper what I knew to be true in my heart. Clara was my champion through it all. She helped me fill out the confusing forms. She rehearsed what I would say at my court hearing for my name change, and she sat in the sterile, fluorescent-lit waiting room of the DMV for 4 hours with me, just so I wouldn't have to be alone. The day my new driver's license arrived in the mail, with the name Seraphine and the gender marker F printed on it, we both cried. We held that small piece of plastic like it was a holy relic. It was proof. It was real. The final and most significant physical step was gender confirmation surgery. It was a decision I agonized over for more than a year. It was a major, irreversible procedure, and the fear was immense. But the feeling of dysphoria, the constant, low-level wrongness I felt about my body, was a heavier burden to carry. Clara never once pushed me. She listened to my fears and my hopes. She went with me to consultations, and she held me when I broke down in indecision. This is your body and your choice. She would always say, whatever you decide, I will be right here. Her unwavering support gave me the courage I needed. The surgery itself was a blur, but the recovery is something I will never forget. It was painful and messy and deeply humbling. And Clara was my angel. She helped me in and out of bed. She managed my medications. She cooked for me. She read to me when the pain was too much to focus. She cared for me with a tenderness and patience that went beyond love. It was a profound act of devotion. She would look at the scars, the evidence of my body's trauma, and trace them gently with her finger. These aren't ugly. Seraphine, she told me one night as she helped me change my dressings. They're a map. They're the story of how you fought to become yourself. Every scar is just a memory of the journey. Slowly, I healed. As the physical pain subsided, a new sense of peace settled over me. The background noise of dysphoria that had been the soundtrack to my entire life finally went silent. For the first time, I felt a complete and total harmony between my mind and my body. One evening, about a year after the surgery, I was getting ready for bed. I had just stepped out of the shower, my skin warm and damp. I caught my reflection in the steamy bathroom mirror and, for some reason, I just paused. My hair was long now, falling in dark, wet waves past my shoulders. My face was soft, my features settled. I ran a hand over the gentle curve of my hip, my fingers tracing the faint silvery lines of my scars. I placed a hand over my heart, over my small soft breasts. I looked into my own eyes, the same eyes that had once stared back at a stranger, and I saw only myself. A slow, quiet smile spread across my face. There were no more questions, no more doubts. The war inside me was over. I am Seraphine, I whispered to the reflection, my voice full of a peaceful finality, completely. I had shed the last remnants of Evan, not like a snake shedding its skin, but like a butterfly finally emerging, whole and transformed, from its chrysalis. And Clara had been there every step of the way, not just watching, but helping to unfold my wings. 5 years. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and other times, it feels like the blink of an eye. 5 years since the final surgery, since the last legal document was signed, since the person known as Evan ceased to exist in any official capacity. 5 years since Seraphine became not just my name, but my entire reality. We left the city, the noise, the concrete, the lingering ghosts of my past. We needed to leave it all behind. We found a small, quiet town on the coast, a place where the air smells of salt and pine, and the rhythm of life is dictated by the tides. We bought a little cottage with a crooked porch and a yard big enough for a garden. And in that garden, I found my new purpose. The sign that swings gently in the sea breeze reads Seraphine's Garden. It's a small flower shop nestled on the town's main street. It's my sanctuary, my creation. Every morning, I wake before the sun, surrounded by the earthy smell of soil and the sweet perfume of blossoms. I arrange bouquets of roses and lilies. I pot tiny, hopeful succulents, and I wrap bundles of lavender. the scent always taking me back to that first day in Clara's sun-drenched apartment. The work is simple. Honest, it's about cultivating beauty, about bringing a little piece of light and life into other people's homes. It's a quiet life, a peaceful life. It's everything I never knew I wanted. One bright, sunny afternoon, I was standing behind the counter, carefully trimming the thorns from a batch of deep red roses. The shop was quiet. The only sounds the soft snip of my shears and the classical music playing softly from a small radio. The front door chimed, and I looked up, a welcoming smile ready for a customer. But it was Clara. She was holding 2 cups of coffee, and her face was lit up with that same warm, gentle smile that had saved me all those years ago. "Thought you might need a break," she said, setting the cups down on the counter. She had opened her own small bookstore just down the street. Our 2 little shops a testament to the dreams we had once shared in a rainy day cafe. She came around the counter and wrapped her arms around my waist from behind. Resting her chin on my shoulder, I leaned back into her embrace, the feeling as natural and necessary as breathing. We stood there for a moment, watching the dust motes dance in the sunbeams slanting through the front window. "Do you remember that first day?" she murmured into my ear, her breath warm against my skin. "At the velvet moon, everything started with a cup of coffee in the rain." I smiled, placing my hands over hers, which were resting gently on my stomach. "I remember being so scared I could barely breathe," I said, my voice soft with the memory. I was wearing a black coat and a secret lavender dress. "It wasn't a secret for long," she chuckled, "and it was a beautiful dress." I turned in her arms to face her, looking into the eyes of the woman who had not only witnessed my transformation but had been its catalyst, its constant support, its loving co-author. The love I felt for her was a vast, peaceful ocean, deep and unending. "From that exact moment," I said, my voice full of a certainty that had been forged in fire and tears and laughter. "From the second you told me that dress suited me, I think I knew this." I gestured around the sunlit, fragrant shop, at her, at myself. "This is the life I was always meant to live." She leaned in and kissed me, a soft, familiar kiss full of shared history and the promise of 1,000 more quiet, happy afternoons just like this one. It wasn't an ending. It was just another beautiful moment in the life I had fought so hard to build, the life I was now, finally, free to simply live, and it was more wonderful than I had ever dared to dream.